Welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Rachel Roller. Today is Election Day in Israel, which has an impact far outside the Israeli borders. So here to talk about that is the former mayor of Shiloh and also the author of 6 books, including Trump and the Jews, David Rubin. Welcome to Wake Up America this morning.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you. Now, Israel is holding its 4th election in 2 years, this time because Parliament failed to pass a budget at the end of the year. But why has there been such a political gridlock in Israel?
Well, it's mostly been a left-right gridlock. And you have to understand how parliamentary democracy works. There are 120 seats in the Israeli Knesset or parliament. And you have the candidate that is selected to form the governing coalition has to get up to 61 of those 120 seats to form a majority government. There are 10 parties that get into the Israeli Knesset every year or every time there is an election, which recently has been more than once a year. But those 10 parties get to negotiate with the leading party to form a governing coalition. They can make all kinds of demands, and eventually, after some 30 days or 45 days after the election, hopefully, a coalition is formed. That's how it works. The problem is that there are 2 parties that are relatively moderately sized parties, and they hold the cards. They are the kingmakers, because even though they are right-leaning parties, they also have sworn not to join a coalition that is led by Prime Minister Netanyahu. And because of that, it's very hard for him to get to a majority, even if he wins, which he most likely will win this election.
Right, and he won't have that majority in Parliament. That's what I wanted to ask you about. Many people seeing this election as a referendum on Prime Minister Netanyahu, facing a host of corruption allegations, but you're saying he most likely will win. Do you think he'll be able to weather that storm?
Well, he's definitely going to win. He's going to get the most votes handily. The question is whether he's going to be able to form that coalition of 61. That is the big question. I don't think that the corruption trial has influenced the election too much. I don't think it's the main issue. The main issue is the economy, and foreign policy is always an issue. So the issues are as usual. The question is whether he'll be able to get that coalition formed.
So, David, let me ask you, if he is able to form that coalition with so many different viewpoints and able to avoid that 5th election, do you think that it would, in fact, be stable?
Well, it really depends on what kind of coalition he forms. He could bring in, you have to remember, Netanyahu is relatively conservative. He's a right-of-center prime minister. And if he brings in a coalition, if he's able to form a coalition with just right-wing parties or right-of-center parties, then it's going to be a very stable coalition that'll actually get a lot of things done in its term. If he has to pull in somebody from the left, a party from the left, which is what he did the previous time around, then there's going to be fighting all the time. The last time, after the elections, a so-called unity government was formed with the left, and it actually was a disunity government for its entire term. They were fighting back and forth. Nobody was getting along, and nothing was getting done. As you pointed out, there was no budget.
We know a thing about that, or two over here in the States as well. But let's pivot for a minute. Let's talk about former President Trump and Netanyahu famously got along, accomplished a lot together. Netanyahu benefiting from that relationship. How do you see things going between the nations with now President Biden at the helm?
Well, it's a big problem. And it could be Netanyahu as prime minister. It could be any of the other leading candidates as prime minister. The point is that President Trump was the greatest president for the Israel-United States relationship ever, and I'm not exaggerating. President Trump had a bond, and it wasn't just a bond with Netanyahu. It was a bond with the people of Israel that came from way before he was president. He He had that bond. He had that feeling with relationships that he built up as a businessman in New York City. And, in my book, Trump and the Jews, I wrote about all of the relationships that he built up. And those relationships led him into his administration. And that's how the bonds were so strong between him and Israel. And that's how he was able to accomplish so much in the Middle East.
Something else people are talking about that I'm curious on, because of course we've been dealing with this pandemic worldwide, not just an issue here in the States. A lot of people criticize the way the Trump administration handled it, now the way the Biden administration is handling it. But there was a lot of support for the way Prime Minister Netanyahu handled it. Do you think that's going to sway the decisions at all?
Oh, it definitely has swayed people. Look, President Trump, with his Operation Warp Speed, got us the vaccines. But then Netanyahu was able to carry it out. I mean, the distribution of the vaccines has been tremendous. Over 90% of adult Israelis already have taken the vaccine. The morbidity and infection rates are way, way, way down, and they're already talking about removing masks pretty soon.
Wow.
So it's been a great accomplishment, and all of Netanyahu's campaign posters, they have a picture of Netanyahu with his hand up in the air, and the slogan is "Back to Life." And it's really true. I mean, he deserves all the credit in the world for that accomplishment.
We're hoping to see those posters here soon as well. David Rubin, that's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right.